Can you pursue a fulfilling career whilst living with bipolar disorder? Coming up today, Laura shares her inspiring journey navigating her diagnosis, the challenges of working in mental health, and the resilience it takes to thrive. Whether you are a professional, a student, or seeking understanding, this conversation is a beacon of hope and insight. Hi, welcome along to the Aspiring Psychologist Podcast. I am Dr. Marianne, a qualified clinical psychologist. Now, we have previously spoken about bipolar disorder on the podcast. If you would like some more information about what it is and the common signs and symptoms, please do consider checking out the episode I did with Sam Swazinski. If you prefer to listen to your podcasts as an MP3, you can listen to that episode as number 135 of the Aspiring Psychologist Podcast. Alternatively, if you are watching on YouTube, the episode is called What is Bipolar Disorder? Trauma Symptoms and Manic Episodes. That was part of our special trauma series. If you do find this content helpful, please do let me know in the comments why you are watching. What stage of your career are you at? Are you looking to gain some more information for yourself, for the service you work with, or for people that you care about? With no further ado, let's dive into this episode and to speak with our guest for today, Laura. Hi, I just want to welcome along our guest for today, Laura Templeman. Hi, Laura.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you also for pitching this episode to me.
Oh, well, thank you for having me.
Thank you for saying that you'd be delighted to come on and talk about this, because I know, talking about mental health and personal diagnosis can feel difficult at times.
Yeah, it can, but I like to use it as a means of trying to inspire other people, and especially having my own mental health diagnoses and working in mental health, obviously it can cross paths with kind of personal experiences and things like that. So, yeah.
Oh, well, thank you. So the aim of today really is for us to think about whether it's possible to work with a bipolar disorder diagnosis. And it might be that someone's listening to this or watching this trying to pursue their own career in psychology or mental health, or it might be that they've stumbled across this because they've got this diagnosis, or they're considering going down an assessment route that might lead to this diagnosis, and they're concerned that they may not be able to work in kind of any industry. So that's kind of where we're heading. But could you tell us a little bit first about how you found yourself heading towards a bipolar diagnosis?
So I started to notice symptoms quite young, probably when I was around 14, and it was more so kind of like quite severe depressive episodes. Nothing ever really came of it until I was around 18, 19 years old, and I started having access to alcohol, kind of substances, and then I moved away from home to go to university, and I started engaging in kind of quite unhelpful behaviours, started drinking, smoking, became quite hypersexual and made use of Tinder in more ways than I should have done. And that's kind of when the immediate red flags started coming on for me. So I tried to chase it up with kind of the Southern secondary care services down where I lived in Winchester at the time. It didn't really go any further because I explained that excessive spending. I spent about £2,000 in about 4 days, kind of racked up some debt, things like that. So I left it a bit until I was about, trying to think now, it was 2022 when I was diagnosed, so I'd have been 23. And some of those symptoms started coming back, and again it was more so the depressive episodes, extreme like dissociation, and it was at that point I knew that something was not necessarily wrong but different, and I thought maybe I should kind of seek that diagnosis for myself. So I actually paid privately and decided to get a private psychiatrist and get a diagnosis through there. And then I started working with secondary care services for medication, who then validated my bipolar diagnosis. So it's been a few years coming, and it got to a point where I thought, I think I need to take it into my own hands to kind of try and figure out what's going on.
Oh, thank you. That was a really useful kind of potted history, and I hope it didn't feel too tricky kind of doing it in such a quick way. So it's been a couple of years now. We're recording this in January 2025. So it's been a few years since your diagnosis. Could you tell us whether you are having any thoughts about, what is this going to mean for my career?
Definitely. So I've always wanted to work in mental health, and I think at first I tried to put myself off it. I thought, I've had a long history of anxiety and depression, again, kind of bipolar. I've got like a PTSD diagnosis, so there's been quite a lot that's been going on. And at first, I was like, surely this is going to be a triggering career path. Maybe I'm not the right kind of person. What if it causes episodes or something like that? So I definitely doubted myself when it came to that. Because it all happened quite quickly. I was diagnosed a month before starting my job in the service that I currently work for. So I did try to push myself, but yeah, definitely moments of doubt, and sometimes I still get them now. Definitely not clear of that. Sometimes there still is doubts of whether, is it going to work? Am I good enough? Things like that. Definitely.
Yeah, and I think maybe that's not necessarily exclusive to having a bipolar diagnosis, I've been qualified since 2011 and still I'm like, am I enough? Are people more exciting and energetic than
Mhm.
me, Um,
Imposter syndrome can be awful, can't
absolutely.
it?
Absolutely. And so I guess it's beginning to separate when that is specifically linked to a mental health diagnosis and whether it might just be that we're at a bit of a low ebb and,
Yeah.
taking things, got a little bit less resilience in our window of tolerance,
Yeah,
possibly.
definitely. Yeah, and I noticed that kind of things like burnout, especially in a PWP role, is definitely well renowned anyway. And I feel like my tolerance for that's quite low in some sense as well. So I've noticed, especially since qualifying and again in the training year, it's very intense. I found that I reached a period of burnout there, and it seemed to be more frequent compared to my peers who I was doing the course with. I had to take kind of quite extended periods of sickness from work. So it was definitely throughout the training year that kind of I think the symptoms became a bit more apparent.
Yeah, and like you say, I did a recent podcast episode about what is a PWP. So if anyone's like, PWP, what does that mean? Psychological well-being practitioner. And there's a recent episode on that that takes you through what that is. But yeah, they really do put a lot on your plate in terms of client load and in terms of client hours.
They certainly do. Very high caseload, very quick turnover. As soon as you're done with one client, you get another booked in. Kind of supervision, CPD, very high pressure job.
Yes, indeed, but a very important job.
Absolutely.
Like you've kind of painted a picture, is the people that have bipolar presentations or bipolar diagnoses do often tend to have kind of a complex trauma background, but not always, not exclusively, but in the most part, that's certainly. Well, I tend to work with people with complex trauma, so that's how I experience lots of bipolar diagnoses. Could you tell us about your experiences of being medicated, so being under treatment for bipolar, but also then, I guess, noticing any fluctuations in mood state? So typically we'd have what people would call kind of an elevated mood state or a mania or manic presentation, followed by kind of periods of lowered, quite significantly low mood. Sometimes it's kind of quite rapid, other times
Yeah.
it's not. But how do you manage working with trying to kind of track all of that?
It can be quite difficult at times, but I will say, like, my supervisors and my manager have been nothing short of absolutely excellent with it, and I've always been open and honest with them. So it can be quite difficult because for me, I struggle to sometimes differentiate between what are the signs and symptoms of an actual depressive episode, or is it just kind of typical burnout, feeling quite tired? And more often than not, I've kind of noticed the symptoms a little bit too late, which has kind of gone into a full depressive episode. I've noticed kind of the elevated mood side, I'll take on too much, and I still haven't quite learned how to manage that. So I'll book more contacts in a day than maybe I should. I'll take on extra clients, extra calls. I'd work past my working hours doing notes and have absolutely no problem with it. I notice even sometimes in sessions, I feel a bit more elevated, I'm more chatty, but it's definitely kind of the depressive and low mood symptoms that I've noticed more whilst doing the job. I have had experience of having quite a severe depressive episode about a year and a half ago, where I had to take about a month off work, kind of extreme dissociation, no appetite, kind of what my therapist at the time described as depressive insomnia. So I'd spend days and days awake downstairs, kind of again a bit of like the substance use. So I started smoking again, drinking a bottle of wine a night. And it went really, really to a very low point, kind of again, kind of some of those negative thoughts. It went kind of slipped into like the suicidal ideation side of things. So it did get really bad. And I think that was me pushing myself to a point beyond burnout as well with the role. So there's been the occasional very severe depressive episode where I have had to take absences from work, kind of on a day-to-day basis. I do try and push through it, which isn't always helpful. Sometimes I kind of ignore my own warning signs, and I think sometimes I gaslight myself and be like, I'm fine, it's nothing serious, I can manage it. But I think since experiencing the depressive episode, I do try and be more cautious. And if I do need to take time off work, then I will. But I definitely utilise my supervision as well. I'll tell my line manager if I'm feeling a bit crappy. Sometimes the passion for the job will lower. I absolutely love working as a PWP, but sometimes there's just that feeling where I'm like, I don't want to get out of bed. I'm dreading going to work. I don't want to do this. What's the point? Kind of that negative cycle of those very unhelpful thoughts. But yeah, my manager and my supervisor have been the absolute crutch to helping me get through that, definitely.
Thank you. And of course, we've got a duty of care to look after you because you're an important part of the staff team, but there's also that duty of care to care for the patients and make sure that they're receiving. And so it's a tricky one to balance, isn't it? And, you mentioned that sometimes you might feel like you're more elevated in sessions, more chatty. And I guess it's just being able to stay on top of that to make sure that you know that this isn't about you, this isn't about us as clinicians, this is about the care and treatment of the people you're working with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the one thing I am is very honest, and I've used it in line management. Again, I'll be honest and say, look, I'm really, really struggling. I might need to take some time off work. There was a time previously where I got quite upset in a meeting and started crying. And I said to my line manager, I said, the thought of having to sit down with like a client today brings me dread. And I said, that's not normal. I said, I'm usually very happy, love my clients, love my sessions, love the job. And I thought, I know that this is not normal for me. And again, I've always been honest about it, and just say, like, I can't do this right now. I am finding it really difficult. And like I said, kind of the feelings of dread and things like that. So, yeah, I'm definitely honest because, again, the clients are what matter within their treatment. It's their sessions. I'm their practitioner. They deserve the best standard of care and my 100%. And when it got to a point where I knew I couldn't give that, was when I kind of said, I think I need to take some time off.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so important. And I hope it was okay for me to ask you that.
Absolutely.
So I'm just thinking back to what you'd said about kind of changes in your kind of alcohol use and kind of your mood states and how many clients you're taking on and what times you're finishing. Sometimes it can be really helpful. It might be something you've done already, but to kind of literally have quite a thorough checklist that you complete kind of every day and almost just being doing with numbers in it and columns or colours, depending on whatever you want to apply. But in that way, you can kind of quite quickly, over a space of kind of a week or a month, see those changes, especially if you color code them. Is that something that you've ever tried or considered?
You know what? No, that's something that I've never thought of. I know there's kind of like the regular mood diaries where you write how you're feeling. Obviously, routine and sleep's very important for someone with a bipolar diagnosis, and because obviously too little sleep can actually cause like manic and hypermanic episodes. But no, that's actually not something I've tried. That sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, almost if you were to draw up a page of, I don't know, you could do it, like you could do grids of 365 days on a big piece of A3 paper or something, or do it a month at a time. But, almost if you're recording, I don't know, like you could give things numbers and each number has a colour. So if you leave work bang on time, then that would be one colour. If you have zero alcohol, that would be that same colour. All of that. So that as soon as things start to get a bit spicier, you're almost noticing those changes. Does that make sense?
That's such a good idea, but I know as of December 2023, because I still had a tendency that although I wouldn't drink as often, if I did go out and drink, I'd get absolutely mashed, like almost blackout. So I said the final time I'm drinking is the work Christmas party, and I haven't drank in like, what, about 13 months. And I went completely teetotal. I haven't touched a cigarette, haven't touched a drink. And I said, I think that's the only way that I'm going to be able to kind of manage that. So yeah, I went completely teetotal from that.
Okay, so it sounds like you've made some significant changes because you wanted to look at your coping strategies, really.
Yeah, and I noticed that again, kind of working in mental health as well about alcohol, substance use, it has very adverse effects. Kind of that high when you're drunk, but kind of the after effects, the depressive symptoms. And then it was about the effect of more so home life, kind of what is it doing to my partner? It's not a behaviour I want to exhibit around the children. Like Mummy used to drink all the time. I really, really do not want that. And I thought, the only way that I can manage it is because I always struggled to manage my usage. I couldn't be one of these people who was just, I'll just have one drink and go home. No, that never happened for me. So I thought the only way that I can manage this is by getting rid of it completely. And I found it easier than I thought I would. I thought, it's going to get to when I'm feeling a bit down and I'm going to want to drink. But I can't say I've missed it. Can't say I've missed it at all.
Yeah, I mean, for very different reasons, I sort of stopped drinking probably almost a year ago.
Hmm.
I've had maybe one or two, but like literally like a glass of wine on holiday because we were all inclusive, and I thought, well, I'll try
Of
that.
course.
It was horrible. So, but I would say I'm largely teetotal, and I found it like easier, like because
Yeah.
I'm not
Hmm.
going out thinking, oh, I'll have to get a taxi home. I'm going out thinking, well, I know exactly how I'm going to get home. I'm going to drive myself home, and I'm going
Yeah.
to be sober, and it's going to be like this. And then the next day, I can get up and feel like I want to get up and
That's,
exercise, and I don't feel like I
yeah.
need to kind of rot in bed. And I've never been a big drinker since having children anyway, but it just gives me my vibrancy. And I think I used to get reasonable amount of colds as well. I would say
Yes.
since stopping drinking, I've maybe had one cold, which is very, very unusual for me, even as an intermittent drinker.
Gosh, yeah. I didn't even put two and two together with that. But yeah, like you said, like hangovers were never nice, and for me it would knock me out for days, and going to work feeling a bit funny, a bit kind of, not as good as really I should have been going to work in. But yeah, again, it used to make me feel really, really depressed afterwards, kind of like the beer fear, I think it's called. And then I realised that I can still have fun without having a drink. The people I surround myself with have been supportive and respecting, and I've always said I don't mind if you drink around me, like that's not something that bothers me. But I'm lucky that I've been surrounded by the support that I have been. And again, my partner very, very rarely drinks. Like, we've never drank in the house, we've never drank when we've gone out. So I'm not surrounded by it either. So I think I've been very lucky in that sense that kind of I've had minimal kind of surrounding or kind of people around me that do drink. But yeah, I've noticed a massive change, and I feel like my health has got better, kind of my skin, my hair, like what you mentioned, kind of a vibrancy. And I can, like what you said, kind of I can go out, spend some time with friends, come home, not feel tired or drained, and then go to bed, have a restful sleep, and wake up in the morning feeling refreshed, and I still had a good time. So it was definitely the right choice for me, and definitely for the better. And like I said, I haven't missed it at all. I don't feel I've missed out on anything. So I'm very lucky, because I know it's not that easy for other people. But yeah, it's worked for me.
Good. Well, I'm really pleased to hear that. And in the old days, I'd say, oh, and it's cheaper too. But actually, the other day I had a mocktail and it was £11.50. So
You are
it,
taking me.
so it really isn't necessarily that much cheaper, I would say.
Gosh, that's abhorrent. £11.50. Yeah, I'd just stick to a Coke and ice, and I'm happy.
Okay, so keeping it cheaper. But even someone I was speaking to recently said they bought a pint of Coke in London. It was £5.50.
Blimey heck. God, that's ridiculous, isn't it?
It
Bloody
really
hell.
is. It really is. I think gone are the days. So when I was kind of growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, sometimes bars would run promotions that if you were the designated driver, your drinks would be free. That doesn't seem to be a thing
Oh,
anymore.
that'd be such a good idea as well, though, wouldn't it? Oh, yeah, they don't
Yeah.
do anything like that anymore. Yeah.
Nothing's for free these days, is it? So we're kind of thinking about, yeah, like family life and work life. And do people around you help you to kind of monitor your states, do you think?
Oh, absolutely. And especially my partner, like, he's been amazing. And I think he can start to tell if, again, my sleep gets quite disruptive, maybe if I've always been quite bad taking my medication, which, again, as a practitioner, we warn clients against. But there's times when I've been feeling low where I'm just like, oh, like, Ryan, I can't be bothered. And he knows what medication I take when, and will come in with it and say, Laura, you need to take it. But he'll start to notice when I'm starting to feel a bit lower. He can tell, again, disrupted sleep, kind of that, like, lack of interest in wanting to do things, not wanting to socialise, kind of not talking. I think as time's gone on, he can pick up on it really, really quickly. And for that, I'm very lucky, because sometimes I don't really notice myself. So definitely, like, my parents don't know much about it, and again, to no fault of their own, it's just something that I try not to kind of bother them with. But again, work great, and I'll openly tell them if I'm noticing any symptoms. But I always remember my line manager saying sometimes we can tell when people are on the verge of burnout, because, like, my caseload management wasn't as brilliant as it should have been, and I was getting a bit behind on my notes and my admin, just because the motivation energy wasn't there. And I've always said to the people around me, like, be honest. Don't think I'm going to get hurt or offended or upset. Like, if you notice something, I appreciate it more if you tell me, so I can get a bit more of a grip on it before things get too bad. But yeah, my partner has been my absolute staple with things like that. And yeah, he's very good at recognizing the signs, and yeah, keeping me on track.
Great. And I know certainly from some of the people that I've worked with, they, especially when they're working, find that their secondary care mental health providers can be quite flexible in helping them to tweak their medication to kind of to cope with any elevated or lowered mood states. Is that your experience as well?
Yes, they've been absolutely fantastic. So I think I go for a medication review usually twice a year. I started off, so I take sertraline, I take lamotrigine, and I take propanolol. So I've got a SSRI, a mood stabilizer, and a beta blocker, so a bit of everything. So they do monitor it closely, saying, is it working? And I remember saying, if you're experiencing quite severe depressive symptoms and we know it's not working, like, you should not be getting that on your medication. So I started off taking, I think it started at 50 milligrams, and then I experienced kind of quite a severe depressive episode, and they raised it to 100. And then the last psychiatrist that I saw, ordered a blood test and said, we can check lamotrigine levels in your blood. and the results came back that there was actually quite minimal amounts. So then it was raised from 200 to 300. But I think I've been one of the lucky ones where like my combinations worked really, really well for me, and it's very rarely had to be tweaked. More so just the lamotrigine, because obviously that's very trial and error, because I think you can go up to 700 milligrams with lamotrigine. So again, there's quite a large window of what works. But yeah, they've been absolutely fantastic. They've listened to my concerns. If there's been any changes, they've actioned it really quickly, kept me involved. So yeah, they've been absolutely fantastic, and what I'm on now works really well for me.
Great. And like you said, everyone's an individual, so everyone's will be different. So if someone's kind of listening or watching this to kind of get an overview, please don't be alarmed if yours does sound different to what we're discussing for Laura. A really common concern is when people are starting medication is whether they will still feel like themselves. Could you talk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, so I've always been open to medication. Again, it's something that I've always been willing to try. I don't remember any initial concerns. I've taken SSRIs since I was about 18 years old, but I've noticed that I'm more like myself. Again, energetic, bubbly, probably I'd say even happy, optimistic. So I think actually, again, I've been really, really lucky with my medication, and it's brought me back to being even half of my normal self, which I'm grateful for. Haven't actually experienced any massive side effects apart from when I started the lamotrigine. I got like quite irritated, quite angry. My tolerance levels were next to nothing. So that was one of the biggest side effects. But apart from that, I've been really, really lucky again. I think I'm one of the rarities where I've had quite a straightforward experience with it. But yeah, minimal side effect. And yeah, I had no initial concerns about taking the medication because I was quite open to it and willing to try anything that helps at that point.
Great, thank you so much. So have we got any kind of parting thoughts really for someone that is, perhaps finding themselves to be in a position of thinking, what about my career? How's that going to combine with bipolar? Have you got any kind of parting words for them?
I think definitely don't doubt yourself. Don't kind of draw a line underneath having a successful career in mental health just because of a bipolar diagnosis. It can be hard, it can be tricky to navigate, it can bring up triggers and uncomfortable feelings, but it can be managed. I think I definitely recommend being as open as kind of you're comfortable with kind of your workplace. Don't be afraid to ask for help from work or to ask for any kind of special considerations regarding workload, clinical contacts. Don't be afraid to say that you're not managing as well. It doesn't make you any less of a practitioner. We're only human and we can only manage the best we can. But definitely kind of you have to look within yourself as well, kind of how can you manage it, and especially outside of work as well. Self-care and you time is so, so important, especially kind of like the compassion fatigue can be really difficult, but you can do it. It is manageable, it is doable, and I'm so grateful that kind of I've had the experiences with the people around me and kind of with the people that I work for. But yeah, it's manageable and you can do it. And a bipolar diagnosis is not the end of the world, the end of your dreams, the end of your career. Yeah, it can be managed.
Thank you. That's such a wonderful place to leave it, and with a really kind of positive, uplifting message. Thank you so much for your time. I'm wishing you well with what you're doing now, but also perhaps whatever comes next for you in future too.
No, thank you for having me and giving a space to kind of talk about my bipolar diagnosis and my experience as a PWP. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you again, Laura. Thank you so much for our guest today, Laura. What a wonderful, insightful conversation that is. Please do, if you find this content helpful, like, share, comment, subscribe wherever you are listening or watching from. It really is the kindest thing you can do for any podcaster, totally for free. I would love to know what you make of this episode. Please do come and connect with me on social media, where I am Dr. Marianne Trent everywhere. Please do also come and join my free Facebook group, which is the Aspiring Psychologist community with Dr. Marianne Trent, and that is the unique and only place where you can get Marianne's weekly video sessions, which are called Marianne's Motivation and Mindset and happen on Friday mornings at 9 a.m. But you can always watch on replay too. Please do come and grab your free psychology success guide, which you can get from my website, www.aspiring-psychologist.co.uk. As I speak, this is a pretty much brand new website, so I would love your feedback on that too. If you value the free content that I provide throughout the whole year, please do consider buying me a cup of herbal tea to say thank you. If it's your time and you're ready for the next step, you're ready for some career development, please do consider joining us in the Aspiring Psychologist membership, which you can join from just £30 a month. Please also do check out the books, the Aspiring Psychologist Collective, the Clinical Psychologist Collective, and if you work with people who are autistic, or perhaps you are autistic yourself, or want to help someone feel understood and represented who might have an autism diagnosis, you might well love diving into an autistic anthology, Neuronarratives of Mental Health Professionals. Thank you so much for being part of my world. The next episode will be available on YouTube from 10 a.m. on Saturdays and wherever you get your podcasts from 6 a.m. on Mondays. Thank you so much. Take care.